If a school is going to teach your babies how to hate themselves, it must die and your baby must live. If schooling will teach you to hate your family and your beloved because they have a different way of being in the world, then schooling must die. Yes. So you can live.
All right. We are here live and alive with the one and only Kiki Jordan, everybody.
Hey.
Hello. Thank you for welcoming me. That was an amazing introduction.
Man, we're so grateful to have you. We already did like the pre-interview earlier and we had to pause it because it was way too good. You was asking us questions. I hope you come back with it and kind of bring some of that energy back. But to start, I think you do a better introduction of yourself than I could. Tell folks about yourself. Who are you? Where you from? How did you get to be who you are and how you are in the world?
So my name is Kiki Jordan, and I am from Berkeley. I'm from the California Bay Area. I am a community midwife. And what does that mean? It means that I use my midwifery powers to support and heal my community. And that shows up in so many different ways beyond just providing pre and postnatal and labor and delivery care. Right now I'm working to raise funds to bring a birth center to the city of Oakland. Yeah. And I've been a midwife, for about 18 years. And I have always practiced in out of hospital settings.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, for folks who are not aware, Kiki was me and Mir's midwife. And, she was amazing. We have the one and only Cashmere here because I would say a lot of it due to Kiki and her support. Because we went with you, we went to you.
Thank you.
And then at 27 weeks, right, Mir found out that there were some complications and we were going to have a C-section.
Yeah.
And Kiki came and she gave us the support we needed. She hooked us up with some folks within the system, within the institution who, and we were talking earlier, we were supposed to have a 15-minute session with this person and they created about 2 hours.
This person in the hospital system.
Yes,
right.
In the hospital. They created 2 hours for us to be able to kind of imagine the type of birth that we would want, given that it wasn't our ideal situation. And then, Mir is still trying to have the baby at home. That was the original plan.
She was committed.
She was committed up until August 13th.
That's right.
And she went into labor. Kiki comes to the house. We got most things set up, ready to go. And then Kiki comes and she starts talking to me at about, I remember, was it midnight?
I think so. Might have been a little later than that.
And she was like, all right, you might need to start having that conversation.
Yeah.
We're probably going to have to go to the hospital. So, we come to terms with what's about to happen. And Kiki is in the T-shirt and sweats and comes with us.
That's right.
To the hospital. She's with us every step of the way. She couldn't be in the room with us where the procedure was, but
the operating room.
She goes home and gets a little bit of rest, I think, and then comes right back.
Yeah.
And is with us that night.
Yeah.
Cashmere's born at 10:05 p.m. Kiki's with us till about midnight, 1 a.m.
Yeah.
I say.
And then goes off and delivers somebody else in our community and then comes back.
Oh, wow. Thank you for remembering that.
I'll never forget this, right? The type of support that we got.
I mean, that's what I mean when I talk about community midwifery. It's, I love to attend births. That's my favorite place to be. I like to say that that's where I shine. But really, I'm needed as an advocate, also connecting you to the resources that you all needed, Mira needed, you needed as a supportive partner. That's a part of my role also.
Yeah. It's, and this included aftercare. You were there.
Totally.
Days after, you were there, weeks after. You did Mira's womb closing ceremony.
Yeah.
Right. So you provided all these services. What brought you to this work?
Right.
How did you come to do this?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. I became a mom when I was 20, and I was Black conscious young woman in Berkeley. And so the people that I was in community with were living a more holistic life and sort of were talking about out-of-hospital birth, having out-of-hospital births. And the moment I heard about a home birth, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. My son's father and I were very committed to him catching the baby. That was a big part of our plan. And I knew that I wanted to have a home birth, but I didn't know that midwives provided prenatal care. So I was going to Kaiser, which I thought was the best health care that I could be getting. And I was seeing a different practitioner every visit. The visits were only 15 minutes. And I just ended up learning by going to the library, that's how long ago this was, that I could hire a midwife during the pregnancy and they could support me with prenatal care. And the first visit I had with my midwife was 2 hours long, and she spent so much time talking about my diet. She blew my head wide open. And my own birth experience was super transformative, and it really influenced how I parented. You know, everything that I sort of learned, how I started to re-envision and unlearn and relearn the world. I carried that into how I parented my son. And I also felt like a lot of the young Black moms that I knew were having really harmful birth experiences. And it was sort of my responsibility to share what I had experienced and what I knew with more folks like me.
Yeah, that's a really hearing the birth story and the connection. I've heard it from different angles, but I haven't had a chance to sit with you.
Yeah.
So what's powerful for me is how it mirrors what was going on for my own partner when we were having our first child, and what really inspired us to move towards connecting with a Black midwife and having a home birth for our second child. And knowing, even going in, I think because Tiff and I do this work, and particularly was grounded in thinking about how our health is compromised by our non-consensual engagement with these various systems and institutions. The fact that my partner was a Black woman with an advanced degree, I knew that we both knew that there were still these very real possible consequences. First time we stepped into Kaiser, we were grateful and blessed to have had I think one of the more grounded practicing OB-GYNs in Los Angeles, Dr. LaTanya Hines, and she was committed to protecting Danielle. But our interactions with the rest of the Kaiser system, it was basically get ready for C-section, right? And so we were prepared for and had these experiences as Ayan was coming into this world. I remember being tapped on the shoulder, midway through the evening, after my wife had been in labor for 16 hours or so. You might need to get ready for this and pray, holding space and asking others to hold space. Not so much because we didn't think an outcome could be possible like what you all had, but more so knowing that wasn't what we felt was the way our daughter was going to come in the world. So there was this really powerful intervention inside the space by a Black midwife, nurse midwife who happened to be on duty because our OB-GYN was done. Right? Her shift was over. So we just
out of luck.
All these things that happen, these protections that happen around us because the system eats people up. And I thought, what would our experience have been had we not had the kind of exposure to education about this, if there wasn't very grounded commitments or centered commitments to ensure, less engagement, from the official systems, because we know anti-Blackness is grounded in all this. And so I'm wondering about yourself, what are some of the ways that you see anti-Blackness, have seen anti-Blackness throughout the systems of the official medical industrial complex or other mundane ways that it shows up?
Yeah, thank you for saying the mundane ways that it shows up, because I think those are the more pressing challenges that don't get talked about a lot. So we hear a lot of folks talking about the research around Black women not being listened to, about Black women having the ability to withstand, higher levels of pain. Mm-hmm. Those beliefs sort of trickle into the care that they are getting, that kind of the biases that they face when they're working with certain providers. But what we aren't talking about is how these systems separate us from our cultural norms and familial practices that are really necessary. You need to stay connected to that in labor. Labor is a very, very vulnerable time. Pregnancy, but labor especially is a very, very vulnerable time. And so being separated from your family, being separated from your partner, the people that you really love and trust the most, and also sort of diminishing their voice in the space is really, really significant. The other thing is that while Black women have worse clinical outcomes and connected, care, cultural congruency between the birther and the provider is really, really essential. We probably aren't, this is hard to say, but this is just what I believe is the truth. We probably aren't going to see changes in those clinical outcomes in this generation, because this is from years and years of imprinting of oppression, generational oppression on our DNA. It's going to take a lot of time of undoing that and people getting this sort of heart-based connected care before we start to see real differences in clinical outcomes for Black birthing people. I hope I explained that clearly, and I'll keep talking about it as we continue to talk. But I think that's one thing that we miss a lot, that it's important for us to have providers who have the same language and the same cultural experience. It's going to take a little bit of time of us building that into every birthing system before we really see the differences.
And I think a lot of what the two of y'all are saying connects, sadly, to what we were finding in our work with birthing parents in Oregon, right? And so much of it was a listening campaign, it was a listening session. And, when we talked about it in the pre-interview, 100% of the parents involved had traumatic birthing experiences in hospitals. From, them not being able to rely on their intuition. Them not being listened to. And so much of what we experienced with you, Kiki, right, was the exact opposite, right? So much of it was to support the development, the cultivation of our intuition, right? And what I heard from you a lot is like your birthing practices is to support the birthing parent and family to be able to lean into that.
And to invite you to be a partner with me in your healthcare. I believe that you have the capacity to understand the care that is being offered to you, to ingest it, digest it, interpret it however you need to interpret it, so that you can be a part of making decisions about what we're going to do next with your body and your baby. And I think there's still this bias around the socioeconomic condition of Black folks that leaks into the perinatal care system. That doesn't doesn't happen with Black midwives and our clients. We come from the same economic experience. I have been on Medi-Cal. That is why I make myself available to Medi-Cal recipients.
Can you, so much of what you're doing seems radical. I think that's kind of what the term that people use. But how would you explain or describe the philosophy behind what you do? I have named it Black Autonomous Birthing Communities.
I love it.
But your work, how would you describe the philosophy behind it?
Well, I love that term, Black Autonomous Birthing Communities. I just think it's really simple. I think it's just traditional holistic healthcare. I think it's radical because we all have accepted the hospital industrial complex as the norm, and we have all been taught to believe that that is where safe birth happens, but it just isn't true. It isn't factually true. yeah, I would call it empowering. And not that I empower people, but I walk with folks through their journey to empowerment, you know? And that's an honor and a gift, really. I feel really honored to be able to walk with people through a very, very valuable and significant time in their lives.
But so much of what, and you just named it, I think, to be very clear, you support primarily women to have home births.
Yes.
Why? Why home births?
Why home? Why not home? Because, why home? Because I think that home is where you get to you get to determine how the entire process unfolds. You get to lead. We shift the dynamic between healthcare provider and recipient. There is no hierarchy anymore. We immediately develop this family-like relationship, and it's nourishing for me too. It's a space where I'm working, but I'm also at the family reunion, you know, and it's just a powerful exchange. Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of fear associated with this idea of relying on ourselves and our internal wisdom to bring life into the world.
Yeah.
And for me, I think a lot of it is incredibly colonial, and a shift in trusting institutions run by the very people who harm us to protect us, and also in our work to educate us, right? And so when we were talking, you know, you were like, run this episode by me again. The connections here, and I think, you know, Kenjus and I see a lot of connections between the work that you do, the really powerful work that you do in supporting families to be empowered to do what they do, to step into their power.
Yeah.
And our belief that schooling should not exist because it prevents us from being able to access that power. It prevents us from being able to practice our cultural medicines, to support in the healing and transformation of our communities. So I see the intimate connection. So much of our work really is invested in shifting from schooling and schools to sites of education.
Yeah.
And I definitely see what you do as a site of education as well, right? Shifting from the institutionalized version of something.
Yeah.
There.
Yep. I was just going to say, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I think what's really powerful about home birth midwives and some birth center midwives is, or just out of hospital practicing midwives, is that most of us have chosen an educational pathway that was through an apprenticeship model. And we're working hard to hold on to that apprenticeship models, the belief that you can get quality education and training through this self-directed pathway with mentorship. And that is traditional midwifery. And that is traditionally how most vocations were learned, you know, and ultimately led to practice. That's the pathway I chose for myself. I knew I needed to like touch it, taste it, smell it, feel it at the same time that I was doing my didactic study. I think that's the connection between the unschooling model that you guys are I'm sorry, abolitionist model.
She starts saying terms.
Sorry,
we both start shifting our chairs. Unschooling.
Please forgive me.
What is that?
No.
Sorry.
Say more. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about the difference between unschooling and the abolitionist model.
It's like we need an insert.
Or theory.
Yeah, it's like we need an insert.
Cue to commercial.
Right, like, yeah, we need like an insert of a animation, you know, sequence where someone breaks down the way
the terms drive across the screen.
As we try to like move back, as you were saying, right? Like we have everything that we need. We've always had what we need to bring our seed into this world. We have had practitioners prior to it's preceded, I think it will exceed what we're in right now, who do that work. And so it's like we really need a dictionary for the folks trying to think the same way around education, right? And I think it's because of the complexity of the ways that we have been so fully brought into the frame of schooling. We argue like from first contact, right? You're getting educated. Your Reuben folks had 7 different ways beyond that of defining gender. So the very idea that I know you've been to Elmina, I don't know if you've been to Ghana, but like those castles that are like, women, men. That's a first form, I think, of like you're getting educated or you're getting schooled, right? Like whatever you were doesn't matter. Here's what the new is, and that's violent, right? So like the resistance to that, I would say, the abolition, the attempt to move away from that began with the people who were like, nah, right? And there were consequences that we've had to contend with saying no or refusing that. And so our work, I think, is one, I hope that at best it's like the breath or the kind of voice of the words of those people who were like, no, right? With their body, with their mind, with their spirit to that. And no, because we know better, right? And then what are the other frames that come about? So I don't know, like, unschooling, schooling, abolition.
You about to define these?
Abolitionist teaching, apocalyptic education.
There's a lot of terms out there.
I'd be interested in like what the differences are and how and why those differences matter. In the same way we've talked about, you were saying, I think in the pre-interview, right? Like this invitation from the medical industrial complex with the advent of greater, I don't think it's consciousness, I think it's like interest convergence of saying, all right, so now we'll allow some midwifery practice, some holistic health to come in. I think that's kind of where we're at with education too, right? Like some of our practices get allowed by the system and we probably get distinguished on the extent to which we accept that allowance.
Yes, some of it gets allowed and we're going to regulate it to the degree that it's just going to mirror what we've been doing previously, and so you see a lot of midwives resisting going into hospital systems, resisting what we're calling integrative models, right? Because you can't integrate into a system where you can't be equal. I don't know. I was saying earlier, and this is something I'm struggling with in my current phase of my career. For many years, I was very more radical, very adamant about staying out of the hospital as a provider. I didn't understand that sometimes people needed to transfer to the hospital, but definitely not in collaboration with the hospital system.
Why?
Because I found it abusive. I just didn't believe that we could create the kinds of transformative and empowered birth experiences that I had seen in out of hospital setting in the hospital. And for the most part, that's true. Like we're in the Bay Area, so we've gotten really lucky and privileged around what's happening in the hospital system. But in other parts of the country, that's still very true. But I do struggle. I am at this place in my career now at 40, wanting to make sure that more people have access to what I and other Black midwives have to offer. I am spending more time thinking creatively about pathways to midwifery. And one of those pathways is through hospitals and community clinics, I believe. Ooh. I feel embarrassed saying that. I feel like a sellout,
We don't have to include it.
It's okay. You can include it. It's an ongoing discussion. Yeah. It's okay to be honest about it. Yeah. I really want to engage with more Black and other midwives of color, Indigenous midwives about this very thing. There is no way around maternity model integration criminalizing other midwives. Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah. There are midwives. The more we integrate into this model, the more the standard of care, the conventional standard of care sort of seeps into how we practice and becomes the standard of care. And it is it is a system that is hierarchical. Ours isn't. We have a lot of autonomy at this point. I get to determine whether I think it's healthy to offer my clients acupuncture and homeopathy and whether it's been studied to death or not. If I engage in a conversation with my client about these practices and they feel like they would like to try an alternative approach, we can work on that together. That can start to get encroached on once we start to collaborate with hospital systems or integrate into hospital systems. And so there are many midwives out there who would say, don't take that step. Don't go in that direction. It's going to start to limit our autonomy.
What that sound like, Kenjus?
Well, I know you're probably thinking, I don't want to, you throwing me like a nice softball down the middle of the plate here. Like,
What that sound like to you? Don't be careful integrating into this system. We understand that you might be able to access more people this way. We understand that it's Black folks there.
Yeah.
But be careful when you go into this beast, because what that sound like?
to me, that sounds like teacher preparation. That sounds like the kind of advice I got coming into the work of scholarship. When you were talking, Kiki, what was coming up for me, because I know we have like a grounded goal here, but what was really coming up for me was like hearing and reading more about these maroon communities who were making compromises for the sake of their sustainability.
That's right.
In relationship to the plantation. So people didn't know, like, this is happening all over in Brazil, Jamaica, Suriname. There have always been these tense zones of transition or turbulence that Black people, our people, African people, have sustained autonomy.
Yep.
And first very militantly and very outside. Mm-hmm. And then there's these generations that come because, look, this plantation is expanding. And our best bet of survival is to try to find a way to compromise. So they struck compromises in Jamaica. No more new escaped folks, right? We'll return them back to you, right? That's a history that we have to contend with. They struck compromises in Brazil, right? Like, literally, we recognize your sovereignty as long as you recognize ours. Mm-hmm. And what are the ways that we have to kind of like finagle our relationship to do that? But eventually, right, like as you're saying, those spaces become less and less sustainable or start to mimic or look exactly like what they escaped.
Oh, this conversation is hard because it's making me change my current entire career trajectory, rethink my, no, it's okay. It's helpful. This is not a new conversation. There are lots of us having these conversations. You just can't create equity when you are collaborating with the oppressor. You just can't. And man,
that counters like 12 books that came out last year.
No, come on.
It's true, though. It's true.
I'm listening. I'm learning.
I know this to be true. And I also know that that's where my people are primarily getting care. And that's where my people feel safe. And the reason that they feel safe is because of systemic oppression and race. The reason they feel more safe in these institutions is because of systemic racism. And so that's kind of where I have to make myself available. At least that's how I feel right now. I mean, I see them as the nurse midwife that you all worked with.
Yep.
Sada Flores, can I say her name?
We said it.
Okay. I see them, people like Sada, as the Harriet Tubman. Somebody has to be in the belly of the beast. To guide folks through. Everybody needs a guide. Everybody needs an advocate and deserves that. And somebody's got to have the courage to do it. Yeah. Not forever, that doesn't have to be their role forever, but I'm grateful that they're there right now.
What you are experiencing or have understood about the medical system, right? There's no doubt that it is actually harmful to a much larger group of people than it is beneficial. How we make sense of it, how we support people varies, I think, in a lot of ways. And the conversation also makes me think back to my grandma. And I was telling Kenjus, I had this conversation with her recently because once we were talking to the birthing parents in Oregon, I started getting fascinated with people's birthing stories in general, right? And so I talked to my mom, found out I was born in a storage closet, or I talked to you about that. And she was 19 at the time, and they gave her very specific instructions about what she needed to do. She went into labor. She didn't follow them fully. So they punished her and made her wait. But I was born 20 minutes after we got to the hospital. So they put her in the space that they had to birth me. I'm thinking back, I'm talking to my grandma, and I found out that she had 2 children at home and one completely by herself. And so I'm on the phone just like, wow, I come from powerful people. And then I called Kenjus right after, though, because she threw me a curveball on the conversation. She was like, and then I couldn't wait till I got to California to give birth in the hospital because it was, right? So she has this powerful experience. What I would think, you had a child on your own.
Yeah.
Successfully.
Yeah.
I would think you are like, you think you can do anything.
Yeah.
And she was excited about the hospital.
Yeah, because there's all this messaging probably at the time that she was giving birth that that's the safest place to be. If all the people in your community and the women in your community are giving birth at home, then you've known since you were a child that you're, first of all, that it's safe, but also that you are capable. So you're not in that place of shock when it happens on your own in the car. We've seen those births in the car. People are panicked because you just know that birthing is normal. It's a normal life event. I really think Black people think receiving care, many Black people, not all, but many Black people think, and many people of color and lots of folks who are immigrants as well, that if you're going to a facility, that you are receiving a superior model of care.
Yeah, I think that's like where the abolition principles that might be a through line for these different projects in education might be helpful, right? Because there's this demand or this reality that even as we attempt to dismantle, however we're attempting to dismantle or infiltrate or whatever, the creation of the alternative or the remembering of the prior, right, has to be needs to be as much, if not more, work around that to sustain what we're doing. I think about that in relationship to how I feel like there's this link between sacred birth that's guided by midwives up through the work that we do in education, even to what we do for our purpose in life.
That's right.
And there's interactions between all these systems that we're trying to abolish, the medical system from the jump.
Yeah.
Because we also know there's folks in our communities who their children get taken from the very jump.
So
that's because of the healthcare choice they make.
Like, okay, I'm working with here's y'all situation.
Yeah.
I've seen videos online where the very same thing that you all were blessed and moved through in a healthy way, people have their babies taken at that point.
Yeah.
Because where were you at this whole time?
Yeah. That's why we need more, this is a shameless plug, more Black owned, people of color owned birth centers. I hate to call it a hybrid model, but somewhere a facility that people can go to where you can get that home-like experience, but kind of mirrors the clinical model in a way that makes people feel comfortable,
safer and supported.
Yeah. I don't know that I want to say it's safer than home, but it
feels safer.
There you go. It feels
the
safer.
Aesthetics of safety.
Yeah. And my vision is for that interdisciplinary model that I'm talking about, where you have maybe a pediatrician, body workers, doulas, midwives, chiropractors, all available in this one space so that we can have these easy, warm handoffs and people can get the wraparound care that I believe contributes to the healing experience, clinically healing, but also spiritually, physically, emotionally healing. That's how we start to create new imprints on our DNA, on our wombs, and really start to change birth outcomes for generations.
Me too. I want both too. I'm imagining what that same space that village holds, the capacities for a homeschooling.
Thank you for saying that, because Well, we in California, so that kind of space is costly. But I do think this is a replicable model. You know, I'm calling it, nobody steal it, a perinatal wellness center. I think that this, the more we talk about it, the more we build on it. I do think this kind of co-working perinatal wellness space or community resource space is a replicable model. And I think that most people start rethinking or begin their thinking about the type of parent they want to be, how they want to educate their children during their pregnancy journey and in community with other people who are thinking that way. So you do just informally see small home group collectives developed out of those birthing communities. You do start to see people thinking about what kind of educational model they want or curriculum model they want for their kids. That's how I learned about the unschooling movement, because a bunch of my clients came together and started unschooling. So there is a connection. And I do think there's these perinatal wellness centers can be a starting point for educational pathways that are alternative.
Yeah, I feel like the what I'm calling the Black autonomous birthing communities are in the same way that like prison abolition and prison abolitionists create a framework for us understanding how to look at schools and schooling.
Sure.
I think, those birthing autonomous spaces also create this framework because y'all have already done it. You've already created the space, and it's more aligned. We were talking about this, like the models of MST movement in Brazil with schools where it's not in a building.
Sure.
So it can't be stopped in the same way because it's you can't stop a movement.
Sure.
You can stop the infrastructure. You can shut that down. But a lot of that, we've forgotten those ways of being where the art, the medicine is in the people, in the community, and not in the infrastructure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. This is a different type of pipeline, right? This is a more liberated pipeline. We're planting seeds about how we're going to educate our children in utero even.
Yes. Yes. And I think when we're talking about education, and we always differentiate it from schooling, when you're talking about this child that's coming into the world, I think a lot of what was hitting me so hard, because there's all this prep for kindergarten, and there's so little that in education anyway that thinks about the longstanding impacts of how a child is brought into the world and how that influences the energy that the birthing parent and the community have to experience, that the stressors, and how much of that goes into that child's understanding of who they are, what they can do. Empowering births are about empowering families, right? And what you've said this about what they're capable of doing. I think it makes sense to us in most other realms, right? We know we've had folks who are kidnapped and taken off to prisons and jails, and many of whom were falsely accused and served years. So that, whether it's reform or abolition, that makes sense to a lot of us. Many folks are listening right now and they're just like, I think it sparks a lot when we talk about people's birthing experiences across the board, across race. A lot of folks are like, yeah, it was really actually traumatic for me. And it's kind of normal. Like postpartum is often synonymous with depression. I used to think it was the same thing.
Yeah, I think most people do. Yeah.
And
she had postpartum.
That's right.
And they mean
that's right.
It was horrible.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't mean what we had.
Right.
We had a supportive community bringing meals every day.
Yeah.
You had folks coming in and engaging in ceremony.
That's
with
right.
you,
Right.
Right. And honoring the power of who you have just graduated into. They're not talking about that.
That's right.
And so a lot of people listening to this might say, wow, and have some type of awakening of like, I would love to try something different.
Yeah, I hope so.
Our challenge, what we have not understood, is when it comes to schools, we don't often see the same relationship. We often hear people say, it was horrible and I made it. And now I'm going to go teach there.
I want to do it.
And I want to support other people to suffer less or
differently.
It's just to not, And so I'm interested in like what you've heard in your stories and experiences from around that fear, maybe because you have successfully supported a number of people who have been more courageous. But like, and I'm guessing that there may be some wisdom from what you're saying that we can maybe apply to families that we serve of like, what would you say about people who are fearful of, for lack of better words, choosing themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I would say that our fear is a reaction or response to the belief that there's this 50-50 chance that you're going to have a horrible outcome in your birthing experience. And that's just not true. 90% of births are normal and natural. We are all designed to come through the human body this way. And that is happening all over the world in really supportive and beautiful ways. I would also invite people to be courageous about how they really envision giving birth. And I say this to potential clients all the time. Envision how you want to welcome this new human into our human family and really be courageously wild about it. I want to have palm trees all over the place. I want to do it in water. I want these people there. I want it to sound, smell, and taste like this. And then work backwards and start building the team that you need to create a safe space for you to give birth. And you have the right to do that. You know, you absolutely have the right to do that. That the belief that we have the right to do that has been taken away from us.
The right to do what?
The right to be courageous about your birth experience, the right to create the birth experience that you really want, a liberated birth experience, a celebratory birth experience. You know, we put so much time and energy into our 21st birthday. Everybody gets crunk for their 21st birthday. Nobody prepares for birth like a birthday, but you really are welcoming this new human into our world who is going to contribute to all of our futures potentially. And that's what I would say about the fear. This fear has been fed to us, and I would ask people to be courageous about resisting that. I also think that what I saw with you and Mira that I haven't seen, I've transferred many people to the hospital over the years. I haven't always seen people invite the hospital staff to participate in their birth ceremony, in the spiritual ceremony or practice that you'll be implementing in the hospital space. And I think the hospital staff really, really appreciated that. Like that reminded them, oh, this isn't just business as usual. We are caring for human beings. This is a celebration of a new human being. And I think it was a gift that you gave them as well. I just want to add, there's fear on both sides. You know, there's fear not only of birthing people. The birthing people are not only experiencing fear, care providers are experiencing fear. That particular system is a fear-based system. You know, you live in a constant state of anxiety while you're at work. And so you can't help but bring that into the birthing space.
That's why those lights so damn bright, afraid of the dark, you know, in those birthing rooms. Yeah, go on.
No, go ahead. You got something on your heart.
No, I was just hearing what you were saying about fear and thinking about something I learned from a Sangoma, a South African healer, who talks about so much of these systems, even what we would think of as evil, is like a energy that has forgotten who it is. And there's fear about that, right? A fear about forgetting. And I feel like that is so infused with these spaces. And I'm thinking about healing from what these encounters have been. Because Tiff was saying, we have trauma that we all know. My mom, like I'm one of four, 3 of 4 of my mom's children. And my oldest sister was born premature in Denver. And my mom tells me stories of like trudging through the snow so that she could touch Micah through this kind of like apparatus. My sister Chandra was born with heart defects. She was 1 year old when she had open heart surgery. And in many ways, it was like this experiment in California because it had been successfully done on a baboon.
Oh, wow.
And like maybe one other child.
Wow.
No one else except for Chandra. And she lost oxygen during the period. And there were these outcomes or impacts of harm that we're still trying to understand what that all was. Myself, my mom talks about this grounded wisdom that women, womb carriers don't will often, if they're in like points of conflict, I learned this from our doula, Cindy, that if they're in these spaces of danger, the body in the womb the person will wait, right, to have the baby. And my mom talks about, that was me. I was like a month and a half after when I was supposed to be coming out because things were just simply not safe.
Yeah.
We have these, but I'm wondering about healing and what we could learn from the ways that you have, or you see the healing practice of those who maybe experienced or gone through trauma or have their own birth, or came through the rites of passage in a traumatic way, and what we could glean from our own work of healing those who have also survived schooling.
Oof. Well, the first thing I want to say is thank you for bringing up your mom's experience caring for your sisters, because I think we talk about the Black maternal health crisis a lot, and we all think of that as just what's happening in Black women's bodies, which is absolutely significant. But we also forget that Black women are caring for low birth weight babies, preterm babies. And so spending a lot of time in the NICU, spending a lot of time separated from their babies. And there's a lot of trauma and harm there too that we're carrying in our wombs. In terms of healing, I think it's what I talked about, like Black women, Black birthing people need to be listened to. They need to have relationships with their providers where there's cultural congruency so that they feel comfortable opening up and being a participant in their care. They need access to wraparound services. So they need a doula, and all of those things cost money individually. So we need systems where people can access all of these wraparound services in a way that they're affordable, accessible. Everybody should be seeing a body worker. Everybody should have a doula. Everybody should have a pelvic floor physical therapist. And it's hard to afford all of that. So somehow being creative in the ways that we make those things accessible. And if at the very least right now, we should be making people aware that those kinds of services are available and that they're being provided by Black women, dynamic Black women. I don't know. I'd be happy to engage in discussion about how we take those kinds of healing practice, that sort of wrap around the care recipient into the educational system. I mean, I bet there could be an educational network or collective where children are seeing the art teacher and the music teacher and spending a lot of time outside with the recreational provider and, I don't know, spending a lot of time in the garden, like where the kind of educational experience they're getting is reflecting what they're actually going to be doing in the world, you know, building an educational ecosystem around our children.
Was it intense that most of those services that you said you would suggest for healing were made into professions, right? Where there are tests and protocol.
That's capitalism.
Right.
Right.
That you have to access and that certain people can. But that's not where we come from.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think a part of why I am at this place in my midwifery career where I'm thinking a lot about healthcare integration and how do we integrate out of hospital practicing midwives, not necessarily into hospitals, but in collaborative relationships with hospital providers, is because I need to start thinking about retiring. Like, I can't just be an entrepreneur forever. I live in a capitalist system. This has to be my profession. I can't just be the community midwife who does one birth a month in a barter exchange for somebody building my deck. You know, I think that's how midwives were cared for in the past. Traditional midwives had some sort of exchange with other people in the community. But now we are all forced into profession, which means so much of how I care for myself and my family depends on the number of people that I take care of every month, you know, and it just isn't healthy. And I'm open to strategizing about ways to prevent that, you know, bring back barter systems.
They used to have a black stamp system in Frisco. It's a barter system. I mean, you bring up, and I think that's where a lot of us are. And I mean, people put their children in schools for a number of reasons, probably very little actually for education at this point.
For care so they can go to work.
Child care.
Care so they can go to work. Yeah.
So you're naming, which I appreciate, like the constraints of how do we, in, you know, being in this stronghold of capitalism, how do we return to ancestral practices that precede kind of the advanced forms of capitalism that we face today?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're being creative in our thoughts around the Birthland Perinatal Wellness Center.
Yes, say more.
I think we're thinking about how this birth center or this wellness center can be sustainable based on a co-working model where people are paying rent to use the space rather than depending on only patient revenue. I mean, that's a part of why we see the hospital system being so harmful, is because they're budgeting the number of births and C-sections that they're going to do every year, and they have to. That's just the system, and their people are employed based on that budget. But instead of just recreating that as birth centers are kind of doing, we really want to create a birth center that is a co-working space, that I said, where everybody who's there is contributing financially to the long-term sustainability of the space.
Mm-hmm. In moving toward this, you're naming a little bit, but what do you feel like are some of the biggest challenges that you're facing in implementing or launching this
Acquiring
center?
Physical space. It's the biggest challenge
because of where we are
in such an expensive city. We're in such an expensive part of the country. This vision is big. I'm talking about a community center, really, but I want it to be home-like. So I would really like it to be, I think all of us who are involved would really like it to be in a home, but we need parking. We'd like outdoor space for the little people.
Yeah.
You know, there's just so many different elements that are really essential to this vision, and acquiring something like that in the city of Oakland is challenging. And I am personally very committed to it being in the city of Oakland. I really want to honor, first of all, the fact that there just isn't a birth center in Oakland right now, a freestanding independent birth center that is owned by community midwives. That just doesn't exist in the city of Oakland right now. So I want to change that. And then I just want to honor the history of diversity and Blackness that was in Oakland. I think it would be really powerful to plant some strong birthing roots. Repeat the acronym that you...
Black Autonomous Birthing Communities.
Thank you. To establish a Black Autonomous Birthing Community in the city of Oakland, which was once a Black city.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah. And even, you know, I'm imagining like collaborations, or these are like where these really, you know, imaginary and such important visioning conversations come into play. Because I could see a space where maybe with the Ohlone people, there's conversations around, as we push for land back, of what that would mean to steward or to have space. And even my mind's going in this moment, like we could build super Adobe homes that would feel like outside.
He's trained in that. You know that.
You can do the cob housing or whatever it's called. Like this earth and dome.
There's practitioners who this would be something that's not that expensive, right?
No.
To house us, like everything.
Yeah.
Right? Housing, like everything, our sacred and our ancestral ways of building are not centered on capitalism, so they're inherently more sustainable, safer, better for our wellness, and a place where birthing could always be reminded of its sacredness. But those visionary conversations, I always am like, how do we contend with, just like those maroons, with this plantation that's always trying to come and undo what we've generated? If David Stovall were here, I think he'd say something like that. Right?
Yeah, but I'm ready for it. Like, I'm ready for those kinds of collaborative relationships with earthen builders in the Bay Area. I don't know if earthen builder is the right term, but like, if we're going to create this radical space, let's really be courageously radical and collaborate with some people who are talking about alternative building models. And let's really make it feel like a village, you know, and just, I think that would be really beautiful and powerful. And we've had discussions about it before, but definitely like regulation comes into question. Can we build a birthing center? In these spaces, will they meet whatever code, that kind of thing? Will we be able to get licensure?
Yeah, there's a fight around that, as there is with everything.
Yeah.
But we had our son at home.
Yeah.
And to your point, like I was thinking about being courageous and like Danielle's vision for what that looked like and how there was a lot that happened that led up to the creation of and cultivation of that space. We got our sister, we had my mom, our midwife, Debbie, and her assistant, who's also named Debbie, I think.
Oh, did you have Debbie Allen?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So it was like beautiful, but like what Danielle would say about that experience in relationship to Ayan's birth was that like those Black midwife nurse practitioners inside Kaiser were like, push.
Sure.
And so when it came time for her to deliver Anansi, we were both looking at Debbie like,
where's the instruction?
And
Yeah.
Debbie's like,
you tell me.
She said, go ahead. And Danielle, beautifully, I saw my son in the underneath the water. He came out smiling. And so I thought about like the difference between holding my daughter as she's at rites of passage in that space.
Yes.
And Anansi's rites of passage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I learned when we were doing the work with those rounded families in Oregon, and one of the practitioners we brought in was part of the healing was telling our children about what their birth process was like for the sake of helping us metabolize whatever trauma that may be.
Yes.
And then like integrate what the protection was and intention was. And then what I learned from some like Jewel or others is like, well, now that's not the first and only rites of passage. Now for Aya in particular, we're having this conversation as Danielle is starting to help us gather who will be for Aya as she turns 5 next July, her rites of passage into 5.
Yeah.
And granted, some of our work is like, it's all centered around you're a blessing. So
that's right.
Our challenge for Aya for this year is how do you really coming into understanding that you are a blessing. Yeah. And that for me is in this conversation going, we have to start at that birth conversation.
Absolutely.
Because there was a whole lot of mess.
Absolutely.
But your energy, the earth shook. You had an earthquake that night.
That's
when she came,
so
one of the
beautiful.
biggest earthquakes. So like the earth was confirming this. And that's what we try to help her realize about it. Also, your mom was dancing to Kendrick Lamar. It was like all this stuff going on.
I mean,
but I'm
what
just
a powerful story. What if you grew up all your life hearing your father tell you the earth shook the day you were born? You know what I mean? You really know who you are and what you came to do, or you are ready to accept who you are and what you came to do, because you're being received with so much love throughout. Yeah. It's really, really beautiful.
And it's the throughout. I think that's the connection to our work.
Yeah.
It is the throughout. How do we maintain these spaces where they are reminded that they are blessings throughout?
Yeah.
And I think that's our frustration and grief about schools. And that's our frustration and grief about the way that we're brought into this world.
Yeah.
That's our frustration and grief about the way we're kidnapped into these other systems.
Yeah.
It's our blessing, the state of us being sacred is constantly challenged, right? As early as when we come into the world, and then as we navigate that, always being challenged. I think part of what we study your model for is how do we, now we're knowing and understanding that there are children who are brought into this world in intentional and sacred ways. We're beyond the hegemony of screaming loudly like we see in the movies, and which we thought that was just birth.
Yep. Yeah.
So we're beyond that. We know more.
Yeah.
What we've engaged in these type of sacred memory work, right? And that's part of our work, is continuing that. Is how do we then maintain the intentionality of young people being seen and treated as sacred? Schools are one of the primary spaces that they're in.
That's right.
So that is part of what we are advocating for in that shift, is that's a lot of time to have to contend. It's a lot of time to have to fight and push back.
Yeah.
And so much of that is, what do you want your energy to be spent on? Because a lot of our practices are for supporting the contending in those spaces. And some folks are saying we are tired of the contending. We are tired of the resistance. We have to do that everywhere else. Can we have spaces for our children and our families where we get to be? Period. And what does it mean for us to cultivate those spaces? And so for folks who are like, I'm fighting for kids, I did that for 17 years now. And And now I'm like, are there spaces where we get to just, because in the being, right, when Dale doesn't have to push, it's being. It's allowing the most sacred parts of yourself to be activated when you get to just be. Because you have everything that you need. And that's the same thing that we say about children, right? Is they have everything they need. But when you're constantly having to defend your position, your presence, then you don't get to tap into just all the greatness that is you.
That's right.
Right. And so we're super grateful for the work that you do in our communities and reminding us of the magic that is just in our existence.
That's right. That's right.
And furthering that cause. And so we were like, how do we find the through line? We know the through line.
Yeah.
It's just an ongoing exercise, practice, the spaces that work in concert for us to be our best and full selves. We want to support, and we want other folks to support this work. How do they do that?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Birthland at Instagram at Birthland Wellness, and then the website is Birthland Midwifery. You can learn more about our capital campaign, and you can also donate there on the website, birthlandmidwifery.com.
Yes, Lord. We appreciate you, Kiki Jordan.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for midwifing our children. I appreciate you both. Thank you.
It's been good. Thank you.
We will embrace a apocalypse. We will embrace an unveiling that says that education is here to bring us life.